We're talking USC football. That's Southern Cal football, not that other Southern Eastern school that wants to rob USC of the real nickname. And it's Big Ten football, believe it or not, for USC football. And anytime we talk USC football here on the Ourlads Football Network, the Ourlads Football YouTube Channel, it's been Ryan Abraham. But Ryan's schedule is so busy that instead we're going to have beat reporter joining us here, Conner Morrissette, first time. So, Conner, thanks for stepping in for Ryan to help us preview the season for the Trojans.
My pleasure. Great to be with you, Greg. Thank you.
You got it. Appreciate it. And let's talk about, because we not only want to talk about the team itself and quickly go over the depth chart, but also take a look at what's coming up in maybe the biggest game of the weekend. It's definitely one of the top games this weekend with USC taking on LSU. So definitely excited about that. But first things first, how's everything going with the team? Looks like staff changing wise. There's one big new member of the coaching staff, and that's on the defensive side, as USC was able to steal UCLA's prized young coordinator to USC, Danton Lynn. So tell us a little bit about Lynn and how this defense will hopefully finally thrive under Lincoln Riley.
Yeah, so Lynn comes in from UCLA, like you said, and they've actually overhauled just about all of the defensive staff outside of one coach. The only guy who's back from a season ago was Sean Nua, and he was the interior defensive line coach last year. He's moved out to the edge, and he's coaching those guys. But it's been a whole overhaul. They've really tried to add a lot of weight this offseason to get bigger. That's been a big component of what Lynn wants to do. And then everywhere you look, there are new coaches. So the defensive backs coach is Doug Belk, who was the defensive coordinator at Houston the last few years. The linebacker coach is Matt Entz, who's won national championships at the FCS level with North Dakota State. He was a head coach there and the defensive coordinator there before that. So he has quite the resume. And then probably the biggest coup, they brought in the Rams defensive line coach, Eric Henderson, and he's working with the interior of USC's defensive line. And already he's kind of emerged as the all-star recruiter of this new defensive staff and the guy who people are really excited about. Lynn works with the safeties primarily when he's working with the safety group, but he, of course, oversees the whole defense. And they haven't played it down yet, but the early returns on this new staff from recruits, from players' parents, from players, it's really, really good. People are excited about the USC defense. They have coaches there who are really good teachers and who are going to hopefully develop some of these guys. Again, we got to see it on the field, but as far as an offseason goes, they probably could have done a little bit more in the transfer portal, and I think that had more to do with NIL than it did with some of their coaching not being up to snuff. I think this is a really good defensive staff, and we'll see some improved returns defensively for sure this year.
What kind of drastic, if there are going to be drastic scheme changes with this defense, or will it stay pretty similar to last year?
I think it will be drastically different. And Lynn, what he was able to do so effectively last season at UCLA was really confuse teams with the looks he would give on the defensive line. So there's no Liatu Latu on USC this season. That certainly made things a lot easier when you have the number one defensive player taken off the board on the NFL draft on your roster. So no one really with a profile like him, but it's an NFL style. So you're going to see guys maybe on one down, you'll have four linemen and they'll all be standing up, and the whole point is to just try to, you don't know who's coming, who's going, who's dropping into coverage, where they're going to attack on the offensive line. And then sometimes in like a short yardage situation, you'll obviously have more down linemen, but the whole point is to try to confuse people. And Lynn was so effective at that last season. The big question is, though, does USC have that personnel that can really bring out the best in Lynn's scheme, especially on the defensive line? Because I feel pretty good about their linebackers. I feel really good about their secondary, but outside of Bear Alexander in the middle of USC's defense, it's a lot of unproven talent on that defensive line. Some guys have really high ceilings. They're just young, so it certainly could be good, but that's where I have the biggest questions. And going into an LSU opponent in week one that has arguably the best line in college football, offensive line, really good tackles, certainly the best tackles in college football, that's really the big question that I have in that matchup.
Any injuries, suspensions, anything like that the fans should be aware of, or is everybody, all the key players, ready to go?
All the key players are ready to go. The only serious injury that happened in camp, Malachi Crawford, a depth corner, a second-year guy, he's out for the year. He banged up his knee, but he wasn't really expected to contribute. And then Zion Branch hurt his hand, and Riley said the other day that he's expected only to miss a few days. He had a minor procedure. So he's a guy who's probably starting the season as a backup anyway, but those are really the only two.
Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at the depth chart for USC, the Ourlads depth chart. And we might have some changes, of course, that we need to update. It's not very easy, but we do a really good job here. So let's go ahead and, well, look, we got to start a quarterback because I think because of what happened with USC and the fact that things didn't go all that well last year, and then you have Caleb Williams, and it's a West Coast team, that I just get the feeling that not many people know about Miller Moss. And they're going to find out this week. Spotlights on them. Spotlights on both teams. It's their game, national TV and all that kind of stuff. Because for what I see in very limited action, I mean, come on. I mean, you can't be impressed. You cannot not be impressed by what you saw in limited action. But now there's a little tape, LSU, SEC defense. So in that respect, it's going to be a really good test for Moss. You've seen a lot of USC football, so how does he compare at quarterback to some of the really good ones, including, of course, Caleb Williams?
Well, we asked him, what does it mean to be a Lincoln Riley coach starting quarterback in week one? Because you have Baker Mayfield and Kyler Murray and Jalen Hurts and Caleb Williams, like that really, really special group. And he said, I'm not there yet, even though he is supposed to start this first game. So he knows that there's still a job to be done. But I've gone on these podcasts all offseason, and I've told people who have asked about Miller, I feel as good as I possibly could about a quarterback who's only started one game in his college career. This guy's done everything right, from off the field to leadership to just staying. He could have gone after the Holiday Bowl for sure to another program and been the sure thing starter. He probably already was the sure thing starter at USC, so that was a big reason why he stayed. But Lincoln Riley made him earn this job all throughout the spring, all throughout the fall. He was only just named the starter last Monday, officially. So even though everyone kind of thought it was his job, he finally earned it last week. But he's someone, I mean, the Holiday Bowl performance speaks for itself. Throwing the 6 touchdown passes, which was a Holiday Bowl record, and looking really, really good. So it's only one game. He still has a lot to learn, and those bowl games can be kind of fickle sometimes. You don't know how motivated the other team is. Louisville, of course, though, they had their full defense. That wasn't like a group of backups. That was the real Louisville. So that's a feather in his cap for sure. And now he just needs to continue to prove it. And LSU, they have some questions defensively. They have a new defensive coordinator for the number 13 ranked team in the country. I think USC could be in a lot worse of a position from an offensive perspective going against a better defense. There are a lot of questions defensively with LSU. And I think that Moss, he's new, but you feel really good about him just because of all the work he's put in, how much the guys love him. He'll be a captain, and he's done a lot of really good things the right way in his USC career. And 2 years under Lincoln Riley, now it's his turn to be the starter. It's hard not to feel good about him.
Now, the transfer from UNLV, do you pronounce it Maeva?
Yes.
Okay, so now, of course, UNLV, it's just one of my favorite stories last year. How could you not fall in love with what was going on there? Anytime one of those programs actually show life, it's just fun to watch. And it was fun to watch them last year, and especially the quarterback situation. And then what tends to happen, the quarterback transfers to a bigger school, and the first thing you're thinking about, of course, is, oh, come on, you're ditching UNLV. You finally got the program going, even though they're in fine shape. From what I see, they've got themselves a pretty good quarterback. But this was kind of interesting that he would make this move with Miller there. Now, Miller can leave next year if he has a tremendous year and the scouts say, hey, come to the NFL. You did everything you needed to do. I don't think that's going to happen, but he could. So this is a great situation for Lincoln Riley to have both these kids if something were to happen to Miller. I guess I was a little bit surprised that for all the places that he could have chosen, he chose to potentially stay as a backup to a quarterback for the next 2 years. Do you think it was because, most importantly, he has the opportunity to learn from Lincoln Riley?
I believe so. His transfer recruitment was interesting. He initially committed to Georgia, And then that made me think, okay, he's definitely comfortable being a backup because Carson Beck, of course, was coming back. But then Beck is maybe the number one pick in the draft if he has a good year. So it's more of a sure thing that job would be open a year from now. And to your point, it's less of a sure thing at USC. So his whole recruitment was interesting to me. I felt like he probably should have stayed at UNLV and had another really solid year and then make that move. And maybe he makes that move to a place where he's certainly going to be that number one guy. But I'm sure he has a lot of different people in his ear, and learning from Lincoln Riley. I mean, I just went through all the quarterbacks he's had who have started under him. It's an awesome place to be. And he was given the nod that it would be a full competition. He wasn't coming in to be a backup. He competed for the job. His problem, Greg, he started really slow in the spring. It was a big adjustment for him to go from UNLV to USC.
I can imagine.
Yeah. And in the spring, he even told us, he said, I was not good. I did not play the way I wanted to play. So he was sort of behind the eight ball. But in fall camp, it sounds like he's made a lot of really, really good progress. We were able to watch one closed door scrimmage, and I thought he looked really good. So Lincoln Riley all along has said he's only going to play one quarterback. I've tried to ask him a couple times, like, you have this really good backup. Is there ever a chance you throw him in and maybe just give the defense a different look on like a third down or maybe even for a series? And he's pretty much said no the whole way. So I think Maeva's pretty comfortably the backup. But what's funny is he has more experience as a college football starter than Miller Moss.
Yeah.
And I said this on a thread on our website. I think if Maeva had spent the last 2 years in Lincoln Riley's system like Moss had, and it was a competition between those two guys, I wouldn't be surprised if Maeva had won the job, because I think his ceiling's a little higher. He has those great tools. He's more of a runner. The ball just looks different coming off of his hand. So if you're a USC fan, you don't really want to be too excited about the backup quarterback. Of course, you want to be excited about the starter. But I feel good about Jaden too. And if something did happen to Miller, it's a really good quarterback room in the sense that how many backups have a whole year of starting under their belt and have this potential that Jaden Maeva does. I think if the quarterback goes down, that tanks a lot of teams right away. And at USC, maybe the season becomes even a little bit more fun because you have this unknown, this guy who might be an NFL prospect one day.
What do you think? Miller's got to probably put on a little bit more of a little bit more muscle. He needs to be a little. Is that possible? Being 6'3" and only about 200, if that's what he is, you can see he's probably. I mean, he's okay. Don't get me wrong, but still, like you said, because Maeva, I mean, he's built like exactly what you're looking for at an NFL prospect. So, not that I'm trying to compare them, but looking at the next level, that's what Miller wants to do. He wants to play a quarterback in the NFL. Do you think that's possible? Is that something he's talked about, or what does he need to do overall? What do you think he needs to do overall, not just physically, but of course, as far as his game is concerned, to be a better quarterback?
It's certainly possible. And even the one quote unquote failure that Riley had as a starter, Spencer Rattler, he's doing great things with the New Orleans Saints right now
yeah.
in the offseason. So everyone who started for Riley has gone to the NFL, and Miller will certainly have that chance. Yeah, I think he could beef up a little bit. The thing with him, he's just so smart. And I think for him, like, ideally, he's a starter. He's this year goes great. He's a Heisman finalist, like so many of Riley's quarterbacks, and he goes to the NFL. But he's a guy. He kind of reminds me a little bit of like a Colt McCoy, someone who could be in the NFL for a really long time, not necessarily as a starter, but potentially as a backup. And I don't want to limit him. He certainly could go and be a starter and be great. But I think his brain is his biggest talent, and that is really valuable, especially for an understudy, a guy who maybe he'll get a chance early in his NFL career, but I think he has some longevity in the sense that he could be that number two guy and really help mentor a younger quarterback. He would do amazing in that role, in my opinion. But like I said, I don't want to limit him. I think he certainly has a chance to go and fight for a job if this season goes well in the NFL and be a draft pick. Not everyone can throw 6 touchdowns against a Power 5 opponent, and that he looked really, really good in that game. We just got to see it for the rest of the season. But I certainly think how this season goes will determine his NFL future, because I don't think he's a guy who can kind of be up and down. And then next year comes around, USC will hopefully have Julian Lewis in that class, and then Maeva will be back. Like he needs to have a great year to really lock down an NFL future, in my opinion. But we'll see what happens.
Running back, let's go to some of these other positions. So Marks was the big catch as far as the transfer portal. So he's calling himself Woody now.
Yes.
Makes it a lot easier for the broadcast teams. But this kid, a lot of production in the SEC. So I know, of course, USC lost a couple of really good players, Is this sort of like, are you looking at this backfield as pretty similar production-wise or a step down from last year?
It all depends if Marks can stay healthy because he's missed some time in the past, but he is an amazing pass catcher out of the backfield. He said he's gotten better at pass protection. He's a great running back. If he can stay healthy, I don't see any reason why USC's running back room wouldn't be the same amount of, or wouldn't have the same amount of production, or maybe even produce more. Marks, I think, is really, really good, and he's a fun piece that Riley can use out of the backfield because he is such a good receiver. That's not really something they had last year. They had that more 2 years ago and not as much last season. So he gives them a new look. The big question, though, if he gets hurt for whatever reason, Quentin Joyner, redshirt freshman, Amarian Peterson, redshirt freshman, Brian Jackson, true freshman. There's just not a lot of experience behind him. Joyner, in the one game, he got a good amount of carries. Notre Dame, he had a fumble. USC wasn't going to win that game anyway, but that was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back and ended any chance of a comeback bid. So I think there are some questions about him. We haven't heard his name a ton in camp. So it's Marks. When we ranked the 30 most important USC Trojans this year, I had Marks as number 4 because I think the drop off between him and everyone else in that room is significant. He could have gone to the NFL this past offseason. I think he's going to have a huge year. It's just all about if he can stay on the field.
Okay, now let's go to the receivers, and I want to start off at tight end because So what was the situation? Because I don't. Let me see. Yeah, okay, I see him over at wide receiver. So what position actually does Deuce Robinson play? Was he recruited as a tight end?
He was recruited as a receiver, but no one really knew that. he was a tight end on all the rankings, the number one tight end in that class. But yeah, he's a full 100% receiver.
Okay. So do they have anybody that they're excited about at tight end, or is that just going to be a position that they're really not going to focus on this season?
They'll focus a small amount. I wouldn't place any bets on a USC tight end doing anything crazy. Lake McCree is solid, but he tore up his knee a week before the Holiday Bowl, and somehow it has come back ahead of schedule. And it's so clear the staff trusts him the most out of all those tight ends. The rest of the guys are really young, so he'll be in there the most. His blocking is kind of up and down. The backup, Cade Eldridge, a redshirt freshman, he's known as more of a blocker. He's beefed up a little bit. I don't think he'll do much in the passing game. And then USC has 3 true freshmen who they're really excited about. Joey Olson, who's listed on the depth chart there, he was a spring enrollee, so he's further ahead than those other 2 guys. But the other 2 guys probably long-term project to be a little bit better. Walter Matthews, who's out of Georgia, and then Walker Lyons, who's out of Northern California. Lyons, especially, his brother is some stud high school quarterback recruit who Lincoln Riley's all over. Walker Lyons is a really good player. He took a Mormon mission this past year, and then his last year of high school football, he broke his leg, so he's just getting up to speed too. But I think next season he could be a guy we hear a lot about. But yeah, don't expect too much from the USC tight ends. I'd say Lake McCree is going to be the guy, and then anything else, I'd be surprised if there's really a lot of production there.
Okay, so then there's 2 guys that I do not see on their depth chart right now. So that's Matthews and Lyons.
Yes.
Okay, so those are guys to keep, and they're both they've been with the program for the past few years?
No, they're both true freshmen.
True freshmen. Okay, that's probably why not there. We'll put those 2 right on the depth chart later today. And who would be considered number 1? Would it be McCree?
Yeah, how you guys? This offense is perfect. Based on what I've been able to see.
Perfect.
McCree is definitely the 1, Eldridge is the 2, and Olson's the 3. That's right.
Okay. Now let's go to wide receiver. And this is definitely one of the strengths, even though there's not like a dominant guy, but it seems like there's just a whole bunch of young, talented receivers, including Deuce Robinson.
Robinson, certainly. The big name we've heard out of camp, though, has been Jacoby Lane, who is, as a recruit, he was the lowest ranked guy out of that Zachariah Branch, Mekhi Levin, Deuce Robinson, and then Lane sophomore class. But we've heard great things about him, and just the limited amount of practice we've been able to watch, he strikes me as a guy who's taken that next jump, and he's a leader. I think Zachariah Branch is in line for a great season, but Jacoby Lane is the name that we hear the most about. So I think he has a chance to be really good. And yeah, how you guys have the depth chart there was some back and forth. Deuce Robinson was maybe a little bit of a backup at one point, and Kyron Hudson had taken his place. But in the most recent practice stuff that we've watched, Robinson was with the ones, and Riley, with that first group offense, he likes to roll with 4 receivers, and I think it is going to be all those sophomores. So they're all going to have a big chance. And then Hudson is a reserve, but he's a guy, who's solid, who's been with the program a long time. Kyle Ford is, of course, the guy who started at USC, transferred to UCLA, and now he's back. He'll have a role. Jay Fair transferred from Auburn. Those 7, I think, are going to be the guys. And then if there's someone else, it might be Jaden Richardson, who was at Division III Tufts last year. But I expect Riley to go with 7. And if it's 8, it's probably Richardson. But those 7 guys are going to be the main guys.
Yeah, it's interesting. You don't normally see the underclassmen starting.
Yeah.
And the upperclassmen are on the bench, but that shows you how talented these sophomores are. And so Robinson's a 5-star. Any of these other, who would be considered the top recruits that there are expectations on? Now, of course, you mentioned Lane. I don't know what kind of recruit he was, so he's definitely someone I'll probably ask you about when I ask to give me a couple of potential breakout players this year. But besides Robinson, are there any other 5 or high 4-stars guys here?
Yeah, so Zachariah Branch is the highest ranked recruit out of this group. He was either the 5th or 6th guy nationally. Bruce Robinson was a 5-star. Makai Lemon was very close to getting that last 5-star spot on 247, but he ends up being a very high 4-star. Elijah Page was a top 247 guy. He's a very highly ranked 4-star guy who's sort of being thrown into the fire this year as the redshirt freshman left tackle. And then Kyle Ford, it was a long time ago, but he was a 5-star guy when he originally signed out of USC. I'm trying to look up and down the roster here. I'm not sure about Woody Marks. I don't think Mississippi State, I don't think he was too highly ranked, but
That's okay.
Yeah, those would probably be the top guys.
And Branch, the other thing that makes Branch really dangerous is his return ability. Is that going to continue? They're going to keep putting him back there because he seems to be pretty valuable as a returner.
Yep, he'll be the punt returner, and then he'll be the kickoff returner. Makai Lemon will be the other guy back there on kicks, but it's all going to be Branch.
Okay, sounds good. All right, and now that offensive line. And anytime you look at USC the last few years, you see the quarterbacks, you see some of the skill position players, but one of the positions, one of the units that has kind of just been okay has been the offensive line. How does this line compare to the other? And I know Riley's only been there a couple of years, but how does this compare to Riley's last couple of units? On par or potentially better?
That's the thing. It's a big unknown, I'd say. The first year they needed a left tackle, and they brought in a left tackle from Virginia, Bobby Haskins, and he played and was fine. But they had those other 4 positions solidified. That was sort of the one really good thing that Clay Helton left Lincoln Riley in a team full of, not so good things. That the offensive line was pretty solid. And then last year they didn't have as many guys. They switched some people around, and it was not good. They needed to replace 3 starters on that offensive line. They brought in Michael Tarquin from from Florida. He's now at Oklahoma. That didn't go very well. They brought in Emmanuel Pregnon, who's still on the team now. He was solid. They brought in Jarrett Kingston, from Washington State, and he was sort of up and down, but he was an NFL draft pick. It just didn't mesh. It didn't gel last year. So this year, Jonah Monheim played left tackle all of last season. He's now the center. In theory, he's going to be great at center, but he's playing that position for the first time. Elijah Page has 1 start as a left tackle. That concerns me. Alani Noah, the starting right guard, has 1 start in his career. That concerns me. Mason Murphy's been sort of up and down as the right tackle. I feel the best about Emmanuel Pregnon. I think he has an NFL draft future. He's the strongest guy on the team. He's going to be really good. But there are a lot of question marks with this group. Could it gel and be really good? Yes, but it's a lot of inexperienced people as well.
Okay, so Monheim, though, I know you mentioned Pregnon. Is Monheim the top dog on that unit?
Yes. The reason I don't feel like amazing is just because he's playing a new position, but everyone said he looks like a natural center. He's going to go to the NFL after this year. The whole reason he made this move is because he projects as an interior offensive lineman, not as a tackle, even though he was so good at it as a tackle. USC last year did move a guard to center, and people were high on him, Justin Dietich, and he has a chance to make the Rams roster, and it didn't really go that well. So that's really the one cause for concern I have. Like, it's just a new position for him, so we'll see.
Okay. All right, let's move on over to the defensive side. And so, yeah, this is really going to dictate whether or not USC can make strides. And so we talked about the staff and the scheme and all that kind of stuff, but now we get into the players. It looks like there's an Oregon State transfer that is key. You talked about Bear Alexander. So there's still some players, notable players, but just looking at this list here, out of the 11 on defense, we've got nearly half are transfers. And a couple of them were transfers last year. So pretty much this entire defense is really new the last couple of years, which is okay. It's the new college football. Who stands out? Who's the lead dog here?
Bear Alexander is the lead dog in this group. I talked about him a little bit. CBS released their top 50 NFL draft prospects heading into the season, and Alexander was the lone USC guy on the list. He came in at number 50. He has that body type that you just can't teach. He's 6'3", 315 pounds, strong as an ox, gets really good push. We just need to see other players be able to play like him. USC, in my opinion, they really needed another Bear Alexander this transfer portal. They got him a year ago, and if they could have added someone else with his similar skill set, that could have gone a long way. But yeah, he's the top dog. Anthony Lucas was the 5-star recruit out of high school, the edge rusher, and it just hasn't really worked out for him at the college level yet. But people are saying he's had a great offseason, and there's excitement around him. There was a lot of buzz around him last year, and he didn't end up doing a whole lot. So he's another top recruit. In terms of other top recruits, those are really the top guys. The rest of the players on there, especially the transfers, it's a lot of more experienced guys who weren't as highly recruited out of high school, but they had really good college showings at their last stops, and they're projecting to start. So I feel good about a lot of those guys, but they don't really have that profile of like a classic USC recruit who 4 or 5 star, the talk of the town from when they were in high school. It's a little bit of a different group.
And they're going to be playing it's just pretty much what their defense is going to look like, where they're going to play with 3 down linemen, like a 3-4 almost look up front.
Yeah, probably more 4. They don't really have like a hybrid edge. Their 3 linebackers are going to be they'll start with 2 linebackers. There might be like Eric Gentry is kind of the guy who we don't really know what to do with. He is 6'7" and 215 pounds, and he's had a great camp. He was an edge rusher at Arizona State for a little bit, and then he's a linebacker at USC. He's someone who could line up all over and could kind of be that hybrid piece. So if he's in, you could see him as a linebacker. You could see him as a hybrid edge rusher. But if it's going by that starting group there, it's going to be 4 down linemen.
Okay. And Cobb. So he seems to be, this is someone to keep an eye on. I mean, he was very productive last year. What do you think about Cobb?
He's someone who I feel like was let down by the defensive coaches last year. He was a second-team All-Big 12 pick at Oklahoma State the year before, came to USC, was one of the guys who was going to turn things around, and the coaching staff just did not help him. He had a lot of missed tackles. He was solid. He was a good player. He was a captain, but I don't think the coaching staff put him in the best position to succeed. He looks like an NFL linebacker. He's big. He with a great season could potentially hear his name called next spring. So he's certainly someone to watch, but he kind of came in with all these expectations, and then the defense was so bad last year. I feel like he was one of the guys who his stock got hurt the most because last year was so bad.
And also, you mentioned, Arnold, he's the guy that comes over from Oregon State. So he's going to be a big part of this defense, right?
Yeah, well, there's 2 Arnolds. There's Easton Mascarenas Arnold and then his stepbrother, Akili Arnold. They both came from Oregon State.
Okay.
Easton was a first-team All Pac-12 pick last season, so he'll probably have a bigger impact. But Akili Arnold, he's going to start too. He'll be right in there as a safety with Kamari Ramsey, the UCLA transfer. So they have 2 guys who came from Oregon State. They're half-brothers, and expectations are high for both of those guys.
Very cool. And then let's talk about that. Some of those players back there. So might as well start with Arnold. So Arnold right now, he's looking more like the strong safety role. And then Jalen Smith, he's one of the guys that actually has been at USC, hasn't he? He's one of the lone kind of holdovers for the past few years.
Yep, out of all those starters, he's the only one who came to USC out of high school, which is crazy. And he's someone who the defensive coaching staff is really excited about. He can play all 5 positions in that defensive backfield. He was the starting nickel last year. He's taken a lot of reps at corner since he's been healthy. He missed a lot of the spring, but he's back now in the fall. And I think he's going to start at corner for them against LSU. But don't be surprised to see him play nickel a little bit, see him play safety sometimes. I think D'Anton Lynn, the strength of this defense is that secondary, and he's going to throw a lot of different looks at teams. So Lynn's going to be a big part of that. I don't see him leaving the field too much. They're going to play a lot of guys, but I think Lynn will pretty consistent, Smith will pretty consistently be out there.
Okay. And then also there's a couple other guys in that secondary we see here, transfers. So you've got Vance and Ramsey.
Kamari Ramsey is going to be a captain, and I think he's one of the most important players on that defense. He was a stalwart for UCLA last season. His PFF grades were fantastic. He is a really, really good player who I think could jet to the NFL after this season. He's that talented, and he followed Lynn from UCLA. Like I said, I think the sky's the limit for him. He's a really, really good player. And then Greedy Vance comes from Florida State. He was sort of behind a couple of NFL draft guys with the Seminoles, but when he played, he was really solid. So he's trying to put his best foot forward in the hopes of getting picked in the NFL draft after this season. He's a guy I really like, and I think the USC staff, once they sort of realized that Jalen Smith could play everywhere, they didn't really want to force him just to be the nickel. So they brought in Vance before spring ball to play nickel, which freed up Smith to do a whole lot more. So I think Vance is going to be a big contributor for them too.
It really does sound like, at least on paper, that there's more talent now and maybe even better coaching. So there should be a lot of optimism with this defense. Now, again, you got to put it all together. You got to play the games and such. But I would think, listening to you, that knowing that you're going to score points, that's not going to be a problem. That this team should be, even though Caleb Williams isn't here, this team should be better than last year. I don't even think there should be a doubt in that, except, of course, we have no idea how they're going to handle the whole Big Ten thing.
I'm just nervous about the lines. That's my thing. I got a lot of crap. I predicted them to go 7-5 again, and people didn't like that on our site, which I understand. They're USC fans. They want to hear that their team is going to be better. But the offensive line, I just don't know for sure if Miller Moss is going to have enough time to get those receivers the ball. And then the defensive line, are they going to be able to stop the run? They're going into this new conference. They've added a bunch of weight, that they're trying to be bigger, but to me, it still doesn't really feel like a true Big Ten roster, in the sense that a lot of those teams recruit the offensive and defensive lines just better than USC has. And that's not just Michigan and Ohio State and Oregon. That's some of those more middle tier teams, like a Rutgers, like a Wisconsin. So
sure,
I just need to see it, because I think going into this new conference, you don't want to be light in the trenches. And that's where I feel like USC's weak right now. Could it all come together and they'll have a great year? Yes. The talent and the defensive coaching is a lot better. The receivers on offense, it's hard not to be excited about them. Moss had that great showing in the Holiday Bowl. There's a lot to like, but defensively, especially outside of Bear Alexander on that line, I just don't know who's going to step up. It's a lot of question marks there. And then you have 2 tackles on offense who haven't played a lot of football and are inexperienced, and then a right guard who hasn't played a lot of football. It's just a group that needs to come together, and if it does, then they'll have a great season. If it doesn't, there could be some growing pains.
And no, it makes a lot of sense. Again, with the Big Ten, we're going to get into the schedule, and I just want your opinion on the game coming up. Before we do that, though, just quickly, how's the kicking game?
It should be better. Last year it was not great, but USC brought in Georgia Southern transfer Michael Lance, and by all accounts, he's done really well. He's experienced, a 6-year guy. He drilled some kicks in the Coliseum at the scrimmage that we watched a couple weeks ago. He looks a lot better than what they had last season.
All right. Now, give me a breakout player. Yeah, give me a breakout player. You've already kind of hinted on a few guys, but give me one from each side of the ball, offense and defense. Start with the defense. Give me your number one breakout player. And again, this doesn't mean that maybe the kid didn't play well last year, but a player that maybe the nation hasn't really heard of yet, but they're going to hear about him now.
Yeah, I'd go with Braylon Shelby, who's listed as a backup to Jamil Muhammad on the edge. He's a guy who a lot of players are saying is going to break out. He was a top 200 recruit, I think a top 100 recruit even 2 cycles ago. I frankly don't know how USC was able to hang on to him, and he's someone people are really excited about. He just has that look of a potential NFL player in the future. He's tall. He's very strong. He's added a lot of weight this offseason. He's going to rotate in a lot on the edge. He missed a little bit of fall camp with an injury, but he's back now. And just because he's not a starter right now, I think he's going to play a lot.
All right, I like that because I don't even recall you mentioning him just yet. So that's cool. 4-star. Let's go to the offensive side. And again, you've already named like Lane. Is Lane going to be your guy, or are you going somewhere else?
I think I got to rock with Jacoby Lane. He caught 2 touchdowns in that Holiday Bowl. He was really, really good in that game. And then I think just the offseason, everything we've heard about him is how great he's had of an offseason. So I expect him to be that big, tall, lanky outside receiver for USC, go up and catch those contested balls. And I think there's a chance he leads them in receiving yards and touchdowns. He's that good.
Okay, now we're going to wrap up with this LSU game and the schedule. So looking at the schedule, it's looking like it's going to be a little tough because you got LSU, which is as tough as you can ask for in a non-conference game. And then you also have another non-conference game. So you got the bookends with Notre Dame at the end of the season. So that's as tough as any bookend non-conference games you're going to find in college football. And then in the new conference, you got to go to Michigan. That's going to look like the biggest road game. And then Penn State, Wisconsin as the 2 toughest home games. So it's tough, but I think what makes it tough are those 2 non-conference games. The conference schedule isn't all that bad, especially with a couple of Pac-12 teams, in there, and UCLA on the road. So, yeah, what do you think about the schedule?
Yeah, I think the non-conference games are the killers. Absolutely. LSU and Notre Dame, that's really challenging, but they don't play Ohio State. They don't play Oregon. That's good. It's unquestionably harder than last season, though, especially at the beginning when USC, their first 5 games, those were not hard. I mean, Colorado gave a little bit of a scare in the second half, but that was a game they were killing the Buffaloes until a few defensive mistakes, and all of a sudden it was a game in the second half. So I just think last year they had the luxury of having that slow build, and they could figure things out, and for whatever reason, it just did not go well. Like, there's no Arizona State, there's no Stanford. They played Nevada and San Jose State. Like, the one sure thing on this schedule is Utah State. And then every other game, like, do I think USC is going to go and win at Minnesota? Do I think they'll beat Wisconsin at home? Yes, but those games are really more challenging than like a Cal trip last year, where Cal probably should have beaten USC if they get a 2-point conversion at the end of the game. Cal wins that game. So USC, their defensive staff is different. It's new players. I'm not trying to say because they didn't do well against Cal last year, they're going to struggle against Wisconsin and Minnesota. My point is the schedule, while they avoided some Big Ten teams that really could have given them problems in Ohio State and Oregon, it's still not easy by any stretch. Like, I want to know what it looks like at Minnesota on October 5th. Like, yes, that's not a team that traditionally has done well in the Big Ten, but they have an established coach, love him or hate him, and PJ Fleck. Like, that's a program who I think you at least have to respect. And that game, to me, like, it's not LSU, it's not Michigan, it's not the UCLA rivalry, Notre Dame, Penn State, but that to me is going to tell me a lot about this team and how well they're going to fare. And even the week before against Wisconsin, I look at those 2 games. If USC, say, worst case scenario, they're 1-2 heading into that Wisconsin and Minnesota back-to-back, if you can beat those 2 teams and beat them definitively, then you head into a home game against Penn State. I think the season looks a lot better than it would if you're 1-2. Usually that's not a really good place to be. But those 2 games, if you are 1-2, could tell you a lot.
Yeah, because we don't know how good this Brosmer kid is going to be at Minnesota. I mean, it is FCS, but it's still very impressive. And you don't know about Maryland. Maryland should be a little bit back because you lose the quarterback of that standard, and it's like there's just no way they're going to be as dangerous. Rutgers is going to be better. Nebraska is going to be better. Nebraska's got that 5-star kid at quarterback. And then, of course, you mentioned Wisconsin. How does Tyler Van Dyke, does he rejuvenate his career with a different coaching staff? So, yeah, a lot of possibilities there. Some that might actually be good, some that might be harder than you think. But either way, it's a Big Ten schedule for the first time. So fans excited about that?
Oh, yeah, because, I mean, you're either in the SEC or the Big Ten or you're in trouble, I think. So fans are really happy that they're in the Big Ten. It was a move that needed to be made. Is it sad the Pac-12 died? Yes, but people blaming USC and UCLA for the Pac-12's demise, I think don't have their heads on straight. Like, this was a problem long before, any of these realignment stuff all happened. So they're in a great spot. Fans are excited, and it's a good place to be.
All right. So the LSU game, what you've been, I'm sure you've been doing your homework already on this team. They seem to have it, even though Jaden Daniels isn't there. I mean, this quarterback looks like he's pretty good. Talk about so interesting. Got similar stories, because both top two quarterbacks leave, don't play in the bowl games, and these two kids look good in the bowl games, and now they're the starters. So yeah, and then LSU just keeps, even though they lost some other guys at receiver, they've got more guys. So Kelly's an excellent coach. Another year there. This should be a really good football game. What do you like about USC's chances matchup wise, and what are you the most afraid of? I'm assuming I already know the answer to that, because you've kind of already hinted to that. So yeah, so let's start off with, what do you think USC might have an edge against LSU with?
Well, first of all, you're absolutely right about all the similarities. Replacing Heisman quarterbacks, new defensive coordinators, a high-profile coach in year 3 at a school who they each won Heisman's, but let's be honest, it hasn't exactly gone according to plan for either guy. So I think it's fascinating in that sense. There's pressure on both coaches, which will be interesting to see how that plays out. But yeah, so the LSU offensive line scares me the most if I'm USC. That's a really good group, and I just would be concerned about getting to the quarterback, stopping the run, just how much time that they'll have on offense. But on the flip side, LSU's defense, they have a couple of good defensive linemen, but it's not a scary unit by any stretch. No. They have Harry Perkins at linebacker, but his adjustment last year from end to linebacker wasn't perfect. People think he's going to take this big step. I mean, he has the talent. He was a 5-star kid, the number 1 linebacker.
Depends where they play him. If you're USC, you want him to just play linebacker, play off the ball, but you don't want him as a straight-up edge rusher, which is really what he'll probably become in the NFL.
It's crazy. It sounds like they're going to just play him at linebacker. So, I mean, they know more than I do, but
look what Penn State did with Micah Parsons. They did the same thing.
Yeah, it's true.
So that's pretty much where, because I agree with you. LSU, I mean, on paper, LSU, the thing that is definitely the most concerning for them is their defense. They've got some good players, especially at linebacker, if you count Perkins there, but otherwise they lost some key talent. So, I could see that. So I'm assuming you're looking at a high-scoring game, or at least that's what you think?
I think so. Their secondary has some questions, too. One note I heard, too, I guess the LSU center is having some snapping issues, so that could potentially help USC. I'm afraid of their offensive line, but if they can't snap the ball, that will definitely
He's the weak link. Yeah. So everybody else on that line might be an NFL guy. So, hey, maybe that's something there.
But, yeah, if the USC offensive line is solid, it should be a high-scoring game. If not, we'll see.
What is that line? 4.5, I believe. I saw the line.
Yeah, it started higher.
Did it?
Gone down. Yeah, it was 6.5. Now it's 4.5.
Yeah, I actually think that's a pretty good line because, again, we just don't know. And look, nobody knows about Moss, and this is what's so fun about college football. It's scary to have these games, though, the first game of the season, because there's no preseason in college. But the good thing is there's a playoff 12 team now. You could lose a game in the first game. It's not going to hurt you as much. But if USC can get a win here, that would be so huge for the program this season and kind of kickstart what they're hoping to right after Caleb Williams is now in the NFL. So what's your prediction? You said, 7-5?
So that's my official prediction. But, hey, you beat LSU, and then that's going to change for me real quick. Yeah, so I like LSU in this opening game. But you're right. There's so many unknowns, and USC certainly has a chance, and there's so many different ways this could go. It's almost hard to make a prediction. But if the offensive line for USC holds up, their defensive line is better than last season, then they have every shot in the world to not only beat LSU, but have a really good season. So we'll see.
And this is at Vegas, right?
Yep.
Have they played at Vegas, USC, before?
Not since they lost the Pac-12 championship to Utah when Caleb hurt his hamstring, yeah.
Okay. What are they expecting? Kind of 50-50 crowd? What do you think?
I'd imagine. I think the fact that it's closer to LA will definitely help USC, but we all know LSU, those fans will travel. So I think 50-50 sounds right.
Conner, how can the fans out there, again, they can go to uscfootball.com. You also have the Peristyle podcast. What is that, available on all streaming services? And do you also have that on YouTube?
Yes. live on YouTube and then all streaming services. And then I'm on Twitter, or on X, I should say, I guess now, at C_Morrissette.
And how often do you do the podcast?
We do the podcast once a week, but then we also do these tunnel vision shows on Thursday night live on YouTube and on Sunday night live on YouTube. And that's our pre and post game show.
Okay. So you do a pre-post game show and then you have one show a week. When is that?
Last year it was Wednesday. We're still figuring out exactly when it's going to be this year, but right now, if I had to guess, probably Wednesday again. So we'll see.
Conner, great job getting us ready for the USC football season. I really appreciate your time and look forward to getting you back again here sometime during the season if all goes well.
Yeah, Greg, thank you so much. Great to be with you, and we'll see what happens this season. Should be a very exciting college football year, that's for sure.
Absolutely.